Welcome back to the New Sentinel, everyone. Today we're diving into the $1 trillion defense budget. Yeah, you heard that right, $1 trillion. That's a number I still have trouble wrapping my head around, even after all these years in and around the military. So, let's start at the beginning. This all kicked off back in February 2025, when the Trump administration rolled out the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, the OBBA. It was a sweeping proposal. Big tax cuts, big defense increases, and, well, big changes to just about everything else.
Yeah, Chukwuka. I remember when that hit the news. I was sitting in my office, coffee in hand, and I just stared at the headline. It felt like deja vu. Took me right back to the post 9/11 days when defense spending just exploded overnight, but this time it was even bigger. The House passed the initial reconciliation package in May with $150 billion in new defense funding. Then the Senate Armed Services Committee beefed it up in June, more for shipbuilding, missile defense, barracks upgrades, and they even capped the number of immigration judges. It was a real kitchen sink approach.
That's right, Major. And let's not forget the numbers. We're talking $1 billion for barracks restoration, $2.9 billion for housing allowances, $1 billion for border operations, plus $46.5 billion for physical barriers and surveillance tech. That's not chump change. The final Senate vote was razor-thin, 51-50, with VP J.D. Vance breaking the tie. Then the House squeaked it through, 218-214. By July 4th, Trump signed it into law, and boom, Pentagon's budget hit $1,055 trillion. That's historic, folks.
It's historic, yes, but let's not lose sight of the framing here. The administration called it a down payment on deterrence and modernization, targeting China, Iran, and border threats. But the legal mechanism was budget reconciliation, so minimal judicial oversight, and it bypassed the filibuster. That's a very deliberate choice. And while the military gets new ships and missile defense, the rest of the bill, well, we'll get to that. But I have to say, the speed and scale of this budget surge is almost unprecedented in modern American history.
You know, Olga, you're right. And Major, your point about deja vu. Man, I felt that too. I remember after 9/11, the mood was all about whatever it takes. This time, though, it's not just about fighting wars overseas. It's about border security, infrastructure, and honestly, a lot of politics. The cause and effect here is massive. The Pentagon gets its surge, but there's a price tag for everyone else. And that's where things get complicated. But before we get into the winners and losers, anything else on the numbers, Duke?
Just that this is the biggest single-year jump in defense spending I've ever seen. And I've seen a lot. The justification was peace through strength. But the ripple effects, well, we're about to talk about those. Let's roll.
So, let's talk about who's paying for this defense surge. The answer, unfortunately, is millions of Americans who rely on SNAP and Medicaid. The new law slashes $186 billion from SNAP over 10 years, and it restores work requirements for veterans and parents of teens. That's over 22 million households losing food assistance and 1.2 million veterans facing reduced benefits. And the legal fallout? States now have to absorb SNAP costs based on error rates, which is going to trigger lawsuits and budget crises at the state level. It's a mess.
Olga, I gotta jump in here. I know a lot of folks are angry about the cuts, but the argument from the administration is that these programs were never meant to be permanent for most people. They say it's about rooting out waste and fraud, making sure only those who really need help get it. But, I mean, the paperwork alone is going to knock a lot of people off the rolls. And look, I might be conservative, but I know plenty of veterans who are worried about losing benefits they earned. It's not as simple as just get a job.
Yeah, and the work requirements are no joke. For Medicaid, able-bodied adults between 18 and 64 have to prove they're working, in school, or doing community service for 80 hours a month. Same for SNAP. More people have to meet the requirements, and the paperwork is a nightmare. Most folks already meet the criteria, but the new rules make it so easy to get tripped up and lose coverage. States are going to struggle to implement this, and a lot of people will fall through the cracks just because they can't keep up with the paperwork.
Exactly, Major. And then there's the housing overhaul. Starting in 2026, there's a 2-year limit on Section 8 vouchers and other subsidies, unless you're a senior, disabled, or possibly a veteran. That means about half of all current recipients could lose their assistance within 2 years. And the system is shifting to state control, so your fate depends on where you live. I spoke with a disabled mother in Mississippi. Let's call her Maria. She's terrified. She's got 2 kids, she's on a voucher, and now she's facing the real possibility of homelessness if she can't prove her disability or if the state changes the rules. She told me, "I don't know where we'll go if we lose this. I've done everything right, but the rules keep changing."
Look, I get the hardship, but the system was always supposed to be temporary. That's what the administration's saying. Time to enforce it. If you're a senior or disabled, you're protected. Veterans too, most likely. But for everyone else, it's 2 years, then you're on your own. I know it sounds harsh, but the idea is to clear out the backlog, get people moving, and make sure the truly vulnerable get help. And, honestly, the waiting lists for seniors and disabled folks should disappear. That's a good thing, right?
It's good for some, Duke, but for millions of others, it's a disaster. And the shift to state control means there's no national standard anymore. Some states might be generous, others won't. And the legal challenges are just beginning. Equal protection, unfunded mandates, you name it. The safety net is being redefined, and a lot of people are going to fall through. That's the reality.
Yeah, and I'll just add, this isn't just about numbers. It's about real people, real families. We've talked about this before, in our episode on the courts and civil rights. Policy changes like this have ripple effects that last for generations. All right, let's move to the border, because that's where a lot of this money is going, and where the politics get even hotter.
All right, let's get into the border. The new budget throws billions at border operations. $1 billion for DoD border work, $46.5 billion for barriers, tech, and roads. And now we're seeing new detention camps popping up, especially in Texas, Carolina, Mississippi. The administration says the border's more secure than ever, and the numbers back that up. Record low migrant encounters, according to CBP. But the headlines? They're all about squalid conditions and overcrowding. So, what's the truth?
Yeah, Chris Cabrera from the Border Patrol Council said it straight. Most of the problems are coming from media narratives. He claims the facilities have high standards and that the worst is over. The border's as secure as he's ever seen it in 24 years. But there's always a gap between what's reported and what's actually happening on the ground. And to be fair, there are still legal questions, especially about detaining minors and due process. That's not going away.
But let's not ignore the real suffering. Even if the numbers are down, there are still people being detained, some with no criminal record, some with families. The administration says they're targeting the worst of the worst, but the reality is more complicated. And with expanded ICE powers and reduced judicial review, there's a real risk of rights being violated. We've seen this before. Detention conditions can deteriorate quickly, especially when oversight is limited.
I want to jump in here because I've actually toured one of these Texas border facilities. I know the media paints a certain picture, but what I saw was a lot more orderly than I expected. The staff were professional. The conditions were clean, at least on the day I was there. Now, I'm not saying it's perfect, and I'm sure there are bad days, but it's not the hellscape some folks make it out to be. Still, the legal issues are real. Detaining people on DoD bases, especially kids, is going to get challenged in court. And, like we talked about in our episode on the courts, the judiciary's role is limited unless there's a clear constitutional violation.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, if you cross illegally, you broke the law. That's the line the administration's taking. But who gets detained, for how long, and under what conditions? That's where the debate is. And it's not going away anytime soon.
And the debate matters, because it's about who we are as a country. Are we protecting our borders at the expense of our values, or can we do both? That's the question we'll keep coming back to, I think.
Well, that's all the time we've got for today. This $1 trillion defense surge is changing everything. Military, social policy, border security. We'll keep following the fallout, and you can bet we'll be back with more. Major, Olga, Duke, always a pleasure. Any last words?
Just this. Keep your eyes open, folks. The headlines don't always tell the whole story. Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you, everyone. And remember, behind every policy are real people. Let's not forget them.
Stay sharp, America. We'll see you next time. Out.
All right, everyone. Take care. We'll catch you on the next episode of The New Sentinel. Bye for now.